this is Tyler with TJack Survival and Survival Dispatch. I've been hiking through this stand of trees, and it's kind of inevitable. No matter where you go in the Forest Service, you're going to run into stuff like this. So I'm going to use it to show you how to create a fire lay. Now, when you're making fires, you don't need to create stones like this. It's a semi-permanent situation, and you'll find out people that are doing this are burning trash and all sorts of stuff. There's nothing wrong with clearing dirt out, making a small fire and burning it completely to dust, cleaning it off so that it's dead to the touch, putting the dirt back. You can actually do it without leaving a trace. So that's the preferred method, but since I'm in this situation, I'm going to show you how to create a fire lay that stays lit. A lot of people will just throw a teepee down and try to light it. Some success, some failures. Sometimes they make a log cabin. Doesn't matter what you're doing as long as you get a fire, right? So my technique isn't the only way, but it's something that works regularly. And it's essentially a technique that I've taken from other people's ideas and mashed them together into something that's my own. A few years I was reading Nesmix Book Woodcraft by George Washington Sears, or his pen name is Nesmix. He was a writer for Field and Stream in the late 1800s, and he talks about these things called doglegs. And I tried to research deeper into what doglegs were and why they used them. Basically, they're just two big logs that you put things on top of so that it picks your fire up off the ground. The positive for this is it gives the fire a place to vacuum oxygen from the base and let the heat rise. It's also positive because the ground's always a little bit wet, and if you're on the snow, it's a lot wet and cold. Well, the fire triangle is made out of heat, fuel, and oxygen. And if you're inhibiting your ability to create the fire by having it on the ground, by taking away from heat, this is just one more step that you can add to the puzzle to make it easier to start fire. Now, in these conditions, the fire is pretty simple, but when it's raining and it's wet on the ground and you really need it, that's when you want to add all of these little extra pieces of the puzzle to make the fire easier to create. So I'm going to set up the fire lay, then we'll explain it to you and show you how it works. So now we got the fire lay. It was quick, like 30 seconds to a minute. And quick note, I have a little silky saw in my backpack, but most of the time when you make something like this, you don't need the saw. I use the saw to make chunks that are specifically the correct length for the little stove that I use in my tent. We're not doing that right now, though. We're talking a little bit about outdoorsmanship, survival, or just basic fire creation. So I'll explain what you've got in front of you here. These big logs, big-ish, are the dog legs. They just keep the fire off the ground. And obviously this other piece is just a platform. Now, As a young Boy Scout, I experimented with teepees, log cabins, platforms, teepees on platforms, and I figured out really quick that the teepees will always tip over. So I got thinking, why not just create a shelf with a tipped over teepee on it and stick your bundle right there? And that's essentially how I come up with this. I took George Washington Sears or Nesmix doglegs idea. I put it on a couple of different very well-known techniques, and then I created my version of the fire lay, Tyler's fire lay or whatever. And when I'm doing friction fire, I'll put my nest right here. When I'm doing just a normal fire, I'll put a bundle of, in this case, dead pine tree right there. Whatever you do, it's going to basically run the flame up these logs and they'll kind of collapse forward. And the reason that this burns so efficiently is because heat rises, creating a negative pressure zone underneath the platform, and that vacuums oxygen into it, and it just feeds the fire as if someone's blowing on it. Now, I'm going to blow on it a little bit to get it started, but if you do this right, you should be able to just hit it with a lighter and sit and watch, and it should do its own thing. It's a little bit damp, the wood is here, so let's get some kindling. Another thing before I forget, if you're in a boreal type forest or northern high alpine type forest where we are here with pine, it might be wise to create feather sticks. I have dead pine needles which kind of flash burn, they burn fast. I'm going to use those, but if that fails, I'll make some feather sticks and quit being lazy, right? But if you put a pile about 4 or 5 feather sticks in here, maybe some pine needles, it'll light and it will stay. So like I talked about earlier, you've got your spark, or in my case, I'm going to use a lighter. My spark creates the flame. The next thing I need is tinder, and that's the feather sticks or the needles. And the next thing I need is kindling, and those are going to be small sticks that I'll add on top of them. And then clearly this is the fuel. So let me go grab that, and I'll come right back. Okay. This is tinder and kindling. So tinder is going to be this dead stuff right here. The kindling is going to be this stuff. If you look at the base of pine trees, they have these clusters of little matchstick size stuff. That's what you want to grab, especially the ones that are up off the ground. It needs to be gray, dead, and off the ground. If you're picking stuff off, off of the ground, above off the ground. If you're picking things up from the ground, it's going to be wet or wetter than things that are hanging above the ground. So another thing that I like too is whenever you've got these little bundles with both pine needles and the pine cones attached, these pine cones have a lot of resin in them. They're almost like little balls of fat wood. So I'll stick that in there. Break off. These are not quite ready to go because they're green. So I want to use the totally brown stuff. It's a bunch of resin or pitch inside of that one right there. I could probably use this, but I'm going to call it good. Now this, there's the tinder, here's the kindling. So once this stuff burns, and the problem with these pine tree needles is they kind of flash burn like gas. They don't really hold very well. So if you give it a little bit of breath, blow on it a little bit, kind of helps it transition from the pine needles burning to the wood, to your kindling. Alright, grab these last sticks just because they're there. Now, should be able to just light this thing and go. Remember where I put my lighter? There we go. So again, spark, flame, flame, there we go. I'm at a really high altitude, so I gotta crank my thing up. Tinder, kindling. Little breeze just blowing my lighter out. Now, there's a little breeze coming in sideways, but because heat's rising, it's crawling up that. I'm not quite all the way lit. I'm gonna spread that flame over a little bit over here too. Definitely those green ones are not quite lighting like they should. Now if you see this happening, it likes to climb, just kind of roll it on top of itself. And you want about a matchstick distance between the sticks. See how they pick up quick? Anything closer and it smothers, anything further and it doesn't transfer the heat quite efficiently. So right now we've got the heat rising. That smoke is mostly water vapor leaving the sticks, and as this kind of moves its way back, it'll just continue to spread. Right here is some of that green pine, because some of it was a little bit green. All of that's water vapor. There's a ton of smoke coming out of the backside. And as soon as the heat gets to it and dries it out and it starts the gasification process, that water vapor will go away and it will be a fairly smokeless fire as soon as those green ones are burnt. Okay, my spark lit my flame, lit my tinder, kindling's burning. Right here the fuel's starting to burn, just like a slow train. Once you get a train going, it's hard to stop. Same time, it's also hard to get that train going sometimes. But if you just do it step by step by step, process by process, eventually you have something that just stays. Okay? And now you can see it's virtually smokeless because it burnt all of that green stuff in there and dried it out. So there's almost no smoke coming off this fire. And largely that's because it has no problem getting oxygen from that platform that it's drawing its fuel from. Okay, in a recap, 2 dog legs to keep it off the ground, a platform to give it oxygen, a shelf on the back, which is a tipped over teepee, a nest that is comprised of tinder and kindling, an ignition source, be that a coal from a hand drill, bow drill, fire plow, or a lighter, ferro rod, whatever you want. And some good tinder sources are feather sticks, cambium layer of cottonwood trees, juniper, sagebrush, pine needles, whatever you have in your area. Maybe you've got cedar bark. Birch bark is amazing. It doesn't grow around here, but birch bark's amazing. Paper bark birch. And then some sort of sticks that are matchstick size, matchstick distance apart. Tamarack. The little bundles of twigs you see at the bottom of pine trees. Light it and cook your food. The other thing I want to note too is most all of my sticks aren't bigger really than the diameter of my wrist and the length of my arm, with the exception of my 2 dog legs. The reason being is as this fire burns, it'll kind of collapse on itself and we'll just roll stuff over. There should be nothing but lye and char left over. There shouldn't be any of this when you get done. It should be as complete white dust, because you want to burn it completely. That way you're not leaving a mess like this fire ring that we ended up using. All right, hopefully that's valuable. If you got a cool way to do this, or you've got some sort of input, suggestions, or things you can teach me, or things we can teach each other, leave a comment down below. I try to respond to all the comments if I can. Thank you for watching.